I am currently the co-chair of the Capital Needs Discernment Committee. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what that is. I think you all know over the past 9 months the work we've been doing. John Ross is my co-chair. I'm just going to read real quickly the names of the other people on the committee so that you are aware of who you can talk to at any point through this process. Karen Berry, Ann Dursey, Liz Everhart, Brad Kennedy, Aaron Shepard, John Stewart, and Suzanne Welch. We recently decided to form what we're calling an advisory committee to the Capital Needs Discernment Committee. We have asked people from across the parish representing different perspectives to join us as we now engage with our architects, which will be the next thing we talk about real quickly. So I just want to read their names again. Anyone who you know and are familiar with and want to talk to throughout this process, you are welcome to contact any of us. Amy Beaupre, Tina Conroy, Tim Dobbin, Mark Edwards, Brooke Lindsay, Peter Plocky, Lisa Reisner, Jay Renner, Richard Saltzman, Lee Walsh, and Penny Winder. So we are very grateful to you all for joining us. And working with Tina are going to be Robin and Clara as well, representing our seniors. So this is a follow-up to the forum that we had back in January. And you guys had raised some interesting questions, and the committee has since talked about those, as well as we started engaging with the Kerns Group. And the Kerns Group worked with us, as Sari said during the service earlier today, on our chancel renovation. And I didn't realize that was 13 years ago. I'm shocked at how quickly time goes by. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean Riley at the Kerns Group, and he's going to introduce himself, tell him a little bit more about you. He'll do a much better job of doing that than I will. And then we'll open it up for dialogue and discussion about our next steps, about possibilities. I think it's important, we'll say it again, we keep saying it in all of our communications, the vestry has not yet decided if a capital campaign is what is best for us at this time. This is part of that exploratory process, and we're thankful to the Norwood Parish Fund for allowing us to engage with the Kerns Group and providing the funds that we need for them to work with us so that we can really see what the possibilities could be for us, and if that's what we are, that's what, really what God wants us to do for our future. So without further ado, Sean, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Jonna. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see everybody has their coffee on this beautiful but brisk morning. I wish the roads could be like they are this morning for all the meetings that I go to. Felt like the only person on the road. I'm a principal at Kerns Group Architects, which is an architectural firm, and I'm a member of Our Lady of Good Counsel Church in Vienna, Virginia as well, where my family and I have belonged for over 30 years. And I'm actively involved in the Sunday school program there, teaching 7th graders. High-level view of what we're going to talk about this morning is just basically to introduce ourselves, a little bit about our background. We'd like to talk at a high level of the visioning, planning process, and then save some time for discussion and questions. So about half the time that we have between now and 11 will be the presentation, and then about half the time for questions and discussions afterwards. Today we're going to stay at sort of the macro, the high level of how the facilities might change and how the process will work. We're not here yet to talk about details, the many important details that will be required, that will be fleshed out as the process moves forward. So as a starting off point, just thought you would find it interesting to see the before shot on the upper left of what the chancel looked like before the organ renovation project that Jonna mentioned at the beginning that was accomplished almost 15 years ago. And then the photo on the right is a picture from the dedication day, the celebration of that day in 2007. Some additional photos of the space from that day. And this is an example of a conceptual sketch that we prepared in working with the committee to help the committee visualize what was being proposed. And as you can see, the sketch is relatively close to the finished project. And so part of our role is to help the committee envision what is being proposed to help the committee evaluate. In addition to being the architect for the entire chancel renovation space, we also designed the liturgical furnishings, which included the altar, the pulpit, and the baptismal font stand, the communion rail. And this is an example of one of the drawings of the altar table that was used to fabricate that piece. So just a brief bit about our background and experience. Since our first church project in 1984, we've had an opportunity to complete over 200 church projects, mostly in the DC metro area, but some have gone beyond that. And they include new construction as well as renovation. I'd like to share just 2 or 3 examples of projects that are relevant to what you all are contemplating and considering for your facility. This is Holy Trinity Church in Georgetown that involved a complex renovation of their aging facilities, including the original 1792 chapel that had been converted to offices and other miscellaneous uses over the years. And one piece of the project was to remove everything within the historic shell and then rebuild it with the sacred space, a small chapel for small weddings and funerals, as well as hospitality space, new accessible restrooms, new office space, and other support spaces within the historic chapel, within the historic shell, as well as additions alongside and below it. We're very used to renovating older historic structures that were built to a different mission. They were built to a different program. And so many committees, many churches have been in your shoes where the facilities begin to hinder the mission and don't allow the mission to flourish and thrive as it should. But the good news is that these buildings are adaptable and can change to bring them into sync with your overall vision. Spaces should have adequate space for gathering and hospitality. Spaces that can accommodate large numbers of people, but also provide areas for smaller groups, smaller conversations, to allow us to reconnect with each other and stand in one another's shoes. There should be spaces for fellowship and gatherings of larger numbers of people where we come together as a community for different activities. Welcoming and accessibility go hand in hand. We need to have facilities that are welcoming to all, regardless of our physical abilities. At St. Mary's Episcopal Church, they went about a renovation and an addition with similar program pieces to what you're considering. And the end result was an addition to the right, to the original church, which is on the left. And this addition provided a new public presence for the church, as well as a fellowship hall, which you see on the right, kitchen, hospitality, outreach spaces. So, how do we prepare for the future? What we've heard so far from the parish, the main areas of focus that the study should look at are: 1, to improve hospitality space, including the fellowship hall and kitchen. The fellowship hall simply isn't large enough to accommodate your largest gatherings. And the kitchen is in dire need of being refreshed and upgraded. It's served its purpose well over the years, but the time has come, it seems. Enhance and retain Sunday school facilities. As a Sunday school teacher at my own parish, in space that is used primarily by the school, I feel the the program director and the teachers at your church's pain in what it's like to have space that has to be shared and is limited to how much you can really own the space and use it to its full potential. We'll also consider opportunities for the education wing. Build more small group meeting space, which is extremely limited, as you all know, presently. Securing adequate parking will be looked at, a huge challenge. And while these primary areas are being looked at, we'll also be looking at continuing to improve accessibility and improving your facilities in terms of infrastructure and maintenance needs. So how is a feasible master plan developed? It begins with us understanding at a nuanced and detailed level your program needs and priorities. At the same time, while we're doing that, we will be studying your existing building and understanding the existing facilities at a deeper level, as well as your overall campus site and the regulations that affect it. Once we have a good understanding of your program and the existing facilities, the existing site, we'll then be in a position where we can generate conceptual design options that solve your space needs in different ways. We will share those options with the committee and help them evaluate the pros and cons of each, along with high-level view of the numbers, of the budgets that might be associated with each option. We'll also at the same time be looking at how these options can be phased. Almost all of the master plan work we do for churches are phasable. They need to be phasable in order to provide a roadmap for growth over time as funds become available. Once the committee has a good understanding of the options and is leaning towards a preferred option, we will then work with the committee to refine that option and refine that budget and finally present it to the vestry and the parish. So, the primary tasks over the next 5 months is, as mentioned, we will analyze the program, the site, and the existing building. At the same time, we are going to research how zoning, what opportunities and challenges the zoning of this property interacts with the options, as well as building codes. The committee will engage representatives of various parish groups to invite their input, and then together we'll generate a phased plan to present to the parish and the vestry. So just to highlight a few of the spaces that will be considered, this is not by all means all-inclusive, but just to touch at a high level. Improving hospitality and welcoming in terms of how we actually are invited into the space will be looked at. Improving hospitality and welcoming begins with the first spaces we come into. Improving hospitality in the fellowship hall and the kitchen, already mentioned, are crucial because they serve all ministries. Improving accessibility to make it easier for everyone to flow through and around the existing spaces. Exploring opportunities for the education wing. Looking at options for securing more parking, and maybe in the interim, upgrading the parking, such as new striping, new surfacing, perhaps better lighting. The parish is blessed with a beautiful piece of land here at the corner of Bradley and Wisconsin Avenue. It's a sacred piece of land because people have been coming to worship here for so many years. And your location puts you in great position to achieve many of the goals and your mission of reaching out and engaging the community. How great is it to be at such a public intersection of the community? We are going to look into the zoning of your property to understand what the opportunities and challenges are as they affect the conceptual design options. We're going to study each of the floors at a more detailed level to understand what can move and what can't move. It's like a chess match as we address and accommodate new program needs. I'd like to show you an example of some graphics from a similar project at Truro Episcopal Church in Fairfax, Virginia. These are the beginning drawings that we did for Truro, which begin to understand the existing building and the existing site. We engage with the committee and stakeholders, and from that we developed a program that quantifies the space needs of the various functions. And from that understanding of the facilities, the zoning, and the program, conceptual design alternatives are generated to review and evaluate with the committee. At the same time, we'll be drawing into focus a very preliminary schedule looking ahead to construction of that very first phase. And the way it might break down is we're at the very outset of the conceptual planning study today. That process should take about 5 months. After that, the parish will be in position to move forward with a capital campaign, which could take about 6 months. At the conclusion of the capital campaign, it will be known how much scope the committee, the parish, the vestry can take on for that initial phase. So the scope of the initial phase may be adjusted after the results of the capital campaign are known. And so then the parish is in position to proceed with the site plan approval, assuming there are additions outside of the footprint. That's not known yet, but if there are, site plan approval would be required. We estimate that might take about 11 months. Detailed drawings for construction, working with the committee over that time as plans are developed from high-level macro scale decisions down to the nitty-gritty of paint colors and what kind of appliances will be in the kitchen will take about another 11 months. We estimate about 4 months for bidding and permits. And then the construction of phase 1, just phase 1 of the master plan is, of course, to be determined. It'll be a function of the complexity and the scope of that, but ballpark-wise, we said maybe a year. So this process, beginning with the planning study, all the way through construction of that first phase, is more than a multi-month process. It's a multi-year process. And we need to all keep that in mind as we develop conceptual budgets. The construction cost portion of implementing phase 1 is the most significant proportion of the overall costs of that first project. And because that project is not going to be built this year, and probably not even next year, we need to build in the appropriate contingencies and escalation to help forecast what those costs will be when it's time to construct phase 1. As we're looking at the budgets and the preliminary schedule, then we will work with the committee to refine the selected option and phasing strategy, and then communicate the vision. Here at Truro, we see covered walkways that invite people in to a renovated facility And then to the left of the tower, we see a glass enclosed atrium of an exterior space that provided welcoming and gathering space for the community. And this is an example of a sketch that we do when to articulate and communicate the vision. This of one of the primary spaces of that master plan, and this a fellowship hall that can accommodate dining as well as use by the community. So that's a high-level view of our background, the visioning process. I'd like to open it up to discussion and questions.
How many of your projects have involved where there's a columbarium or a similar site where people's remains are, and how have those issues affected the planning process?
Right. Several of our projects have involved columbariums. Projects that involve an existing columbarium is something that we need to understand at a detail level to know if it is sacred in the sense that we don't want to ever consider moving it. Do we need to plan for growth of the columbarium? It's been a rare case, I would say, where there was an opportunity where the committee, the parish, said that the columbarium could move from its present location. Most often, it's a sacred place that needs to remain and continue to be sacred and planned around. Yes.
How do you approach like different architectural styles particularly when people might have different preferences within a parish?
Sure.
Was my microphone not?
It's on. Just hold
I was asking about like different styles, and I mean, I think most of yours look pretty contemporary, but with a bit of historical flavor. I mean, like how do you just approach coming to consensus on, like, what style you're going to use for a church?
Great question. Well, our firm, our practice does not promote any one style. I think you got a little bit of flavor of that from the projects that I showed, in that each project is unique in terms of style. The architectural style of what gets built usually flows from the conversations with the committee and an understanding of what the parish and the committee need and are desiring. In most cases, or that I can think of, the style usually flows organically from an understanding of the existing architecture that we're touching, as well as architecture in the surrounding community. We look for clues as to what could be drawn on to incorporate existing elements into the architecture.
If I can add to that, Kerns was very sensitive in the Nave renovation to the fact we had a Georgian style. No stained glass windows, no brick walls. They saw our space and modified it with that in mind.
Thank you.
And I think we researched their other projects, and they do that as well.
Thank you.
I'm curious about your experience using sustainable materials, or things that are eco-friendly. We have a pretty active eco team here, and we love the shade trees, and we see other churches around town that are really become models for how to be sustainable. So just curious about your experience there.
Thank you. Yes, sustainability and environmentally friendly design has been part of our practice for decades. We think it only makes good sense to be good stewards of our environment. I mean, God's creation is special, and it needs to be thought of and handled as special. So it begins with understanding where the sun is as it crosses the sky, and how that changes from summer months to winter months, how light enters a space, how sun is controlled to reduce glare and also to reduce energy usage. So that element, the importance of that has been made known to us from the committee, and that will be integrated into our conversations to look for opportunities for environmental stewardship that range from reducing energy to using eco-friendly materials and efficient use of water and lighting and electricity, so that you all can continue to be good stewards. I think one big thing that you're already doing is reusing your existing building. There's a huge building stock in the United States and elsewhere that just by virtue of adapting an existing building to a new use is such a green and sustainable thing, as opposed to, say, tearing down and starting anew. So adapting your building is probably the biggest single thing that you can do, that you already are planning to do, but then there's other detailed things that we'll look at going forward.
John, can I ask you to go back to the slide with the topical areas? that
Yeah.
guide us here?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what kinds of experiences or ideas you have about creating a space for church school purposes that gives teachers what they need in terms of flexibility and permanency of the space without having rooms that sit empty, 166 hours a week.
Right. We're used to multi-use of spaces is a common thread in all of our church projects, because the hours of usage, like you say, are intense at certain times and then they just sit there empty. So that is part of our mindset, to think of all spaces, including classrooms, how they could be used for, let's say, small meeting rooms or other gatherings throughout the week. And so that when we do that, we have to think about lighting, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, and how that affects the space, as well as having storage that is lockable and can be tucked away when it's not being used. So that'll be part of our mindset.
To what extent are you thinking about changing what we look like from Wisconsin Avenue so that it might not be just 3 shut doors 6 days a week?
That is definitely on the radar screen. It was brought to us as an issue from the committee to enhance the public presence, enhance how one enters the building from Wisconsin Avenue. It will be part of the study.
You briefly mentioned accessibility. Could you say more? Our last renovation did nothing to reconnect the two parts of the parish and left older residents unable, or those disabled unable to access the rest of the parish. How much of a concern is that this time, and how much flexibility do we have to do anything?
Sure, good question. Well, the previous project was really focused on the sanctuary, and specifically even the chancel within the sanctuary. And so the scope of that project didn't really extend. And so now is the opportunity to do that, because this study will be focused on the entire facility, not just the sanctuary. And so we will look at how can we make it easier for accessibility from, let's say, this entrance all the way to the nave without having to use an elevator. We don't come with solutions in mind. We just know that your building, like many church buildings of the day of this particular era, have multiple levels. They love to change levels back in the 40s and 50s. Well, the reality is is looking for opportunities to find sloped walkways or ramps that would allow somebody to get from one end to the other without using the chair lift like you have now, which is not ideal. It's it's just not ideal. It's not ideal, and people don't like to use it for good reason. You also fortunately have an elevator, which helps a lot, but I think in reality we need to look at what would it take to introduce ramps that are of the appropriate slope to eliminate steps, at least on one side, for getting into the sanctuary. And so that's I think what we will begin to look at is replacing steps with ramps where possible.
And they had a good example that's not in these slides, but that they showed when they came in to speak with the committee of a exterior courtyard that they had used to enclose, fix a drainage issue, and then create a sloped walkway as well. So I think they do have good experience trying to find creative solutions with the available space. So.
Thank you very much for your proposal or
You're
your
welcome.
presentation this morning. It's very exciting. And also for the beautiful work in the nave. I mean, I'm new to St. John's and didn't see what it looked like
Thank you.
before. And it's one of the things that attracted us when we first started visiting. The question I have is, we have a lot of, it's sort of during the transition, during construction, and in your experience, we have a lot of programming going on. If this, for example, is under construction, where would that be during the transition and during construction especially?
Your house.
We dealt with that in reverse. We couldn't use the nave for several
Exactly.
we worshiped in here, and we did functions in other spaces, and we just accepted it.
Yeah.
And knew that it was going to be an inconvenience for a number of times. So we will do whatever it is. We as the church need to guide how to work around that.
Okay.
That's working with the contractor and the architect, but that's more on us. If we want a
Got it.
vision and a change, it's on us.
Yeah.
It's an important part of the conversation going down the road.
In your firm's experience, have you been able to introduce really out-of-the-box ideas that people, maybe a few had contemplated, but most had never even imagined, let alone entertained, and actually led to really, any profound changes in how the building is laid out and operated?
I think that is really our responsibility, is to listen to what you all are thinking about, and then to come back with options that you may not have ever considered. It's sort of in our mindset to think out of the box. Well, what if we did this? We know it might have a big ripple effect over here, but it would really solve this problem well. And so I think those options, well, as part of creating those options, we'll have that in our mindset. We don't come with any solutions in mind. They will organically flow from our conversations, but there will also be an opportunity to just sort of step out of the box and think about what's possible if we really solve this problem well, but at the expense of some other things. Maybe it's worth it.
So taking that a step further, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but
Sure.
the parish hall. I mean, here we are. This is probably next to the nave, the most used room in the church.
Right.
When you look at this space, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things you see that are most in need of changing?
Well, I think number one, from what I understand, is it's physically not large enough. And because it's not large enough, it limits what you all can do as a parish. From what I understand, there's many activities that you would like to have that would involve more people, but you're not able to do that because of the physical dimensions of this space. So I think examining and creating options that show how this space could expand, could get bigger, is probably the single most important piece from my limited understanding so far. And then once the size can be found that is comfortable and satisfies the needs, then the rest is really a lot of details as far as the acoustics, the lighting, the finishes, the AV, what the flow is like into the common areas and kitchen. All that should flow organically, but increasing the size, knowing there's a property line a few feet that away, is going to be the first and most important thing that we address.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we own this way
But
and to the
Peter,
curb.
also to answer that, doubling this space, let's say, I'm just putting that out there, doubling this space, to Marnie's point, 6 days out of the week, how can we make that flexible space? So not only can we have one large space, but can that be divided into 3 or 4 smaller spaces? So 4 different committees can meet on the same night that currently doesn't really have the opportunity to happen. So we have another question over here.
Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
I'm interning here for 6 months, and I just want to offer my own experience in the diocese, looking at you all as you decide whether or not you're going to go forward with this process or not. So my question has to do more with the sanctuary, even though that may not be something you're looking at. Do you have experience making altars and altar areas more accessible? I may be ordained a deacon in September, and one of the women in my cohort is in a wheelchair. And I just want you all to think about Anne doing all that she does at the altar in a wheelchair, or even Sari. Is there a way to make the altar area, or have you made altar areas more accessible with ramps on the sides that you don't necessarily have to come up in an elevator behind the scenes to come out?
Well, actually, one can get to the chancel at grade. It's from one of the doors, but the big challenge that we need their help to solve is the tower area is too small to put in a ramp. So we've got to tackle that issue of how to get up and down without that lift. That's why that ugly lift is there, because that was the only solution without bumping out the tower wall, which is we couldn't afford at the time, but it's on our list of things to solve.
Will the school, the preschool, will it impact the school that's here during the week?
When we started this process, the committee was very much focused on how we can live into our mission and vision as St. John's. And one of the things that prevents us from fully living into our vision and mission is our lack of flexible space, our lack of space during the week because of the school. So it was very important for us to consider the economic impact that we'll have losing that income from the school, but additionally how that relationship is managed with the school so that if and when the time comes that we have decided to be more missional in our space, that the school is understanding, and those conversations have started, but that they understand this isn't, we're kicking you guys out because, you know, for whatever reason, we're not. We're really trying to do what's right for us as a parish. So, so that's, it will impact our tenant, the school, and other things. But the committee has had a lot of deep conversations about that, and you know, we're hoping that that transition becomes a smooth one.
Thank you. In terms of doubling the space, we're doing a course over the next 6 weeks in the parish hall, and the acoustics are not good, and our parishioners cannot hear. So we're moving the tables right up to the speaker and doing some other things. So if you have dividers, would that solve the issue of being able to hear in a large space for a small group meeting?
I think you're absolutely right. In a small group, in any room really, we need to consider the reverberation time of a space. There are a lot of hard surfaces in here which cause reverberation, which is not too much reverberation for the spoken word. So having more materials that absorb sound, and oftentimes those folding partitions that subdivide spaces can have soft, like fabric-wrapped insulation that can absorb sound. And so we'll need to look at the ceiling, floor, and wall surfaces to bring the finishes in sync with the AV system, and that will help the spoken word quite a bit. You're welcome.
Would out-of-the-box thinking include what other parishes and the National Cathedral have done, which is remove all the pews and make the largest space a multi-use space?
That's a great question. That is...
Actually, you know, we listened to we did a listening session in August, and primarily it was not about that. It was focused about our other more pressing needs. That's always something to consider, but we just had a renovation of the nave, and I think the impetus and all we've heard from everybody thus far is turn to the rest of the church before you go back and look at the nave to take the pews out and have it as that be the multi-purpose space, that there's many more problems elsewhere on the building that we should address. That may not have answered your question the way you wanted it, but.
No, my question was, are you considering, since you were talking about out-of-the-box solutions, that's one that many people aren't familiar with. My last parish had it, and it's more affordable than a lot of things. It could require less renovation. So I wanted to know if you would consider offering it as an option, explaining that.
Tell you what, we'll put it on the list and let the committee discuss it.
Jay,
this is the first person, you're the first one to ask it, so we'll listen.
Yeah, it wasn't something that the committee considered when we started our work, and it wasn't really something that we heard initially starting back in end of last summer, because we were so focused kind of on this other space, and because that space is pretty new. Personally, not speaking as the committee chair, I love that idea. I love what the cathedral's doing, and you know, using it for many different reasons. And there was recently an article about how doing that type of thing at churches is drawing people who would not normally come to church at all, or that particular church. So I think there's merit in the idea. I'm not sure that that's something that fits into what we are thinking or what we can do at this point, but it will be on the list.
But also another idea is to make the chapel, take the seating out of the chapel and make that into a multi-use space, even for contemplative prayer or other types of services.
Thank you very much. What would you foresee as upgrade to our kitchen area?
The specific, well, can you repeat the question, please?
What would you foresee in your experience with other churches to be an upgrade to our kitchen area?
Okay. The upgrade, well, first of all, we need to look at the size of the kitchen relative to the size of a potential new expanded fellowship hall. For example, that kitchen may be in great proportion to this hall and serving the amount of people that you can serve in this room. But if we're talking about serving an increased capacity in the fellowship hall, we first need to see if the existing kitchen has that capacity, or does it need to get larger. Once we know what the appropriate size should be, then we need to look, then we'll start to get into the details of replacing counters, cabinets, appliances, finishes, lighting, to bring it in sync with 21st century 2020 needs. What the details of that are, we have no idea now. And the details of the kitchen design will actually probably begin to come together post master plan. At the master plan, we're at the macro scale, which is how big is the space big enough, or does it need to get bigger? And if it gets bigger, what is the flow from the kitchen to the fellowship hall to service and trash? And does the footprint need to change? Does the footprint need to expand? So just staying at the macro scale in this first phase, and then post fundraising campaign, once the phase 1 project is more defined and known, then we'll begin to dive into the details of, well, what do we need to do within that kitchen? But at first glance, as part of this, we just need to make sure it's the right size and in the right place relative to everything else. You're welcome.
Another thing to consider about the kitchen is not just for our use, but as well as everything else living into our vision and mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we upgrade it so that it can better serve that purpose as well?
Yeah, following up on what Karen's just saying, I think that maybe not thinking of the kitchen as an after the grand plan, and maybe thinking about it outside the box as a way of connecting more authentically with the community. There may be opportunities as a commercial kitchen space to live into our vision a little bit more. So maybe I would encourage making it part of the grand plan from the start.
Absolutely. I think that we would consider that part of the macro, big picture thinking for the kitchen. You know, we're not going to be ready to pick out appliances yet or pick out the shelving, but how it's used and who uses it, and can the broader community, you know, what would it take for them to come in and use it as part of your mission? That is part of the study.
I had a question about your timetable for the capital campaign.
Yes.
And you noted 6 months. And it seemed like a very short period to me. And I was wondering if that's sort of the initial phase of working with a professional to develop a plan, and then maybe a longer period of time to raise the funds.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to a professional about capital campaigns. Typical, like the most intense part of a campaign is the initial 6 months. In terms of giving and how long that takes, that's typically 3 years. Mm-hmm. You know, you can give over 3 years and raise the money over that amount of time. But the campaign itself is typically relatively short in terms of making the asks and education on what's happening. And working with a professional, yeah. Yes, yeah, before that 6 months, yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions. The kids are like freaking out there if you have any. So, anyone else have questions? Yes, David.
I think it's probably my kids that are freaking out over there, so the benefit of asking an extra question is entirely self-interested in this one. But in terms of out-of-the-box thinking, have we considered that the longer-term objectives of our current tenant in the space that they use may actually be aligned with some of our objectives? And have we had a discussion with them about, if we did work, would they, other things that they would be interested in, which may set them up for a longer-term tenantship and have the benefit of us being able to redevelop the space as well?
So some of the conversations that the committee has had has really focused on us not being a landlord to the school as missional. So when we were doing our initial questioning of the parish back in the summer and fall, a lot of what came out was how can we live into kind of our social justice mission, and does the school fit into that? We haven't, to answer your question, we haven't really had those conversations with the school itself, but I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's worth having. I think it's worth having those conversations, but that wasn't really part of what we heard from people. Is that it would be really exciting if we were to invest in doing something missional and vision, with our vision process. That the school's mission not necessarily fitting into what our mission is, reaching out into the broader community, or into our just immediate community, and having space for conversations that we want to have, and doing social justice work and things like that. So, I mean, I think we can certainly talk to them about what our plans are and how they think they might fit into those. But it wasn't what we heard generally when we started doing this process. So,
John, I just wanted to say one thing too about this school. We have a really good mutual relationship with the school and an ongoing conversation with them, and they've grown and done really well in this space, so that right now we're bumping up against each other because honestly I think they need more space too. They could use more space. So it's, I mean, the conversation is ongoing, and every 3 years we have been signing a lease, so the conversation about that is coming up. So this won't be a complete surprise to them, I think, and so.
I think that's it. I think it's 11:01. So I want to thank Sean. If anyone has any questions about the process, about anything we didn't get to discuss today, please let us know. And we will keep you apprised through Crossroads as the work continues over the next few months. But if you feel like we're not doing that, tell me, and we'll make sure that you get the information that you're seeking. So thanks everyone for being here.